Well, Buffy's canceled. And after a whole pilot and Chloe Zhao at the helm and Sarah Michelle Gellar back, even the vampires are confused. How did this happen?
Well, nothing says fresh creative direction like digging up something from 1997 and asking it to save 2026.
So this week, we're asking then, why does Hollywood keep going back?
And we're wondering, is it nostalgia or is it something else? Is it fear?
Because let me tell you, this trend is not going away. In 2026, everywhere you look, it's reboots, revivals, sequels, spin-offs.
And the only thing aging faster than that IP is me.
So is the 90s boom a gift to audiences?
Or is it really proof that the industry has run out of ideas?
Well, Richard, let's get into it.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, Richard. How are you?
Good, good. So Buffy is canceled.
I'm bummed about this. This is really a shock to me. I was very excited for this reboot. And what's getting me is this kind of the insane timing of this announcement. Chloe Zhao and Sarah Michelle Gellar have been working on this for years.
Yep.
Okay. The fans wanted it. They've been so kind of particular about where this is going to go. Now, though, just when everybody feels pretty secure about things because there's a whole pilot shot, and I mean, Chloe Zhao is coming off of Hamnet, the whole internet is alive with sparks of quotes from this woman and, you know, deep diving into her creative process just because she's just so incredible. And right when she's about to walk the red carpet for the Oscars on Sunday, and right as Sarah Michelle Gellar is having her almost 20-year comeback to the big screen, she's
Right.
on the South by Southwest red carpets to premiere Ready or Not 2. Hulu execs call these two up and say, guess what? Buffy's not happening. So that seems pointed, but it's also interesting because now we got to hear both women kind of speak about this in a really timely way. Richard, what are your first thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts are that, you know, the idea of the timing of it, them both having sort of a career renaissance. Sarah Michelle Gellar is one of the judges on Star Search. She's in Ready or Not 2. You know, the Buffy thing was looming large over this. Chloe Zhao, I mean, this is an unbelievable career that she's formed for herself. And so you've got that sort of high-level talent. The idea that it was canceled, though, it comes as no surprise to me that it was handled as poorly as it was, because this is just the way it is now. I cannot tell you how many times over the years I've interviewed actors who have said, oh, yeah, I found out my show was canceled when I read about it in the newspaper. Oh, yeah, I showed up on set and my parking spot was gone. You know, that kind of thing. So you hear these stories all the time. So the idea that some, you know, person sitting in the C-suite of the production company that was producing the Buffy reboot said, oh, well, you know, let's pick today, the worst day of all time, the day that both our lead creatives on this show are about to get a whole lot of attention, and use that day to cancel this show and do it via the phone after they've worked on it for years. It does not surprise me one iota.
And it feels like pointed, and I love that Sarah Michelle Gellar did not hold back. Mm-hmm. She herself kind of insinuated on the stage when people asked her about this at South by Southwest that just the fact that they used that timing, like what should be, you know, the best weekend of these two women's lives, like the height of
times.
So she's saying even the fact that they used that timing, it seems pointed. Like these are the type of people we're working with. It feels to me, I took it as this is how much they dislike us or our creative direction in this, that they wanted to kind of jab. And Sarah Michelle Gellar straight up said there was an executive who would be excited every day to tell us that he never saw the original in its entirety and that he truly wasn't a fan. And some internet sleuths have dug up exactly who that executive is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just looking up, I was listening to what you're saying. I was just looking up, though, a quote that I think probably sums up what it's like to work in movies and television. It's from Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas author, amongst many other things. And he wrote that the television industry is a cruel and shallow money trench through the heart of the journalism industry. It's a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs for no good reason. And so, let those words ring around in your head a little bit as we talk about this story. And I think Michelle Gellar has publicly named the person who she thinks it is, a guy called Craig Erwich, who's the head of Hulu Originals and Disney TV, and says, yeah, he never knew the original. He wasn't a fan. You would think that if you were part of a larger ecosphere that is going to produce this show, a reboot of this show, then you could spend a Friday night at home watching reruns. They're
Or
not
at
hard to
least
find.
zip the lip. I mean, if I was creating a project that this many people loved and was so important, you couldn't pry that information out of me with a crowbar. So, and that Hunter S. Thompson quote is good. It reminds me of what Chapel Roan was saying recently about this whole drama around, she was eating and a child came by to look at her, and apparently a security guard went up to the child and yelled at her so much that she cried. And this was no ordinary child. This was the child of a superstar. And so it evolved, and Chapel Roan is very she had nothing to do with this, but her kind of comment was very, she has said, and actually it was on Tom Power's CBC Q, which is a great soundbite. It's such an incredible show, and it's such a powerful soundbite to get from Chapel. So kind of around this issue, she's not speaking exactly about this incident, but she's been in the spotlight for this before. But her point is, when you don't protect yourself, you do really, really well. And so what Chloe Zhao and Sarah Michelle Gellar have talked about is that they were really, really trying to protect Buffy, the Buffy fans, the original concept. And that is kind of what Chloe Zhao on the red carpet also talked about. That was their ultimate goal. And in fact, Sarah Michelle Gellar was only in a tiny bit of this pilot because they really kind of wanted to introduce a new Slayer and stay more true to the themes of the original show rather than just kind of let's give them lots of Sarah Michelle Gellar and lots of what we think is going to. So I think there is something there about that. When you're protective of things and you're trying to, kind of be thoughtful about something, that you're right. It's not really that surprising then that this project isn't these execs want to hear, we're willing to go anywhere. We're willing to do everything. We're willing to kind of copy other concepts and go in all these different directions. And it's a shame, but this is such a massive IP. Richard, when something like this happens, is there still hope?
I think there's always hope. I mean, I think that this was just very likely a combination of a lot of elements that just didn't fit together like the cogs in a wheel, Hulu and Disney, from what I'm reading right here, reportedly still like the Buffy IP, and they may explore a different version of it in the future, but this specific pilot and series is no more. And what that strikes me is that it's probably going to end up being something that is not filtered through the sensibilities of Sarah Michelle Gellar. It will be filtered through someone else, and who knows, maybe they'll get a super fan and it'll all work out well for the fans. But I have a feeling that probably what they want is something, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen the pilot, less artful maybe than Chloe Zhao wanted to make. More, what one of the things they said is that her style, her cinematic style didn't fit mainstream TV needs. Now, I would say, would you say that to the people behind The Sopranos? Would
Right.
you tell that to Vince Gilligan behind, Pluribus and Breaking Bad? Would you tell the people that created Mad Men, oh, sorry, your style is too cinematic. I don't
It's
think this is going to work.
It's that would never happen. And if that had happened, we would be so remiss. We would be
Yeah.
short of such amazing things. Or what you first said too is like Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is my favorite
Right.
show ever.
Right.
Talk about not mainstream, just weird, just strange. And also when you're saying, would they say this too? My mind goes, would they say this to Paul Thomas Anderson? Like
Right.
Chloe Zhao is coming off a near Oscar win, a Golden Globe win. Hamnet is incredible. And like I said, my whole feed is just like Chloe Zhao saying
Yeah.
like the most powerful artistic. She did these things. I'm sure you've seen, Richard, the dance takes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like what kind of creator? So I guess to explain, give a little backstory to that, you could probably explain it better than me.
Well, they were just trying to, when you're making a very serious movie like Hamnet, you have to do something, I think, to kind of crack that tension to, if you've seen the movie, you'll know that there are some very, very heavyweight scenes dealing with grief and, impenetrable sadness. And so what they would do is at the end of some takes, they would dance and they would shoot them. They were apparently all filmed and, but it was just a way of saying, you know what, the art we're creating is one thing, and this is how we shake it loose so that we can, go home and sleep in our beds without feeling horrible about life tonight.
Just the care and the thoughtfulness, and it's like
Yeah.
that comes through in the film. Like when you hear that and then you think back of the experience watching it, you're like, yeah, I was profoundly devastated, but there was a sliver of hope. And that is like, we've talked about the film, like that is the beauty of the film, is
Yep.
like that massive just love letter to art and creation as a thing. And so I'm going to call out sexism here. I have no problem playing that card. I think if this was a man, this would not be happening. There would be no question about her creative, if it's too mainstream, if people are going to get it or not. Like that is mind-boggling to me. This woman is, and you know what? It feels like it's just fueled them both. So they will look, Craig Irwich or whatever your name is, you will look back at this and regret.
Well, I would imagine that David Lynch kind of left behind a number of executives that are wondering what the heck happened, because apparently what would happen is someone in a suit would arrive from the studio and say, I'm here to overlook the shooting today. I'm here to have a look and see where if we can save a few dollars here and there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And David Lynch would play them like a violin. And what he would do is play to their egos and say, you know what? You have a great look about you. Why don't we get you in as a backgrounder in one of the scenes here? We've got a great scene coming up with Dale Cooper and the thing. You can be in the booth right behind him. You'll be on camera the whole time. You'll be famous. And so he would send them to hair and makeup and say, take your time with this one. Get him a costume, get it, and eventually burn through an entire day of shooting, put him in the back of a scene, shoot it for a little bit and say, good night, thanks very much. It was great having you on set.
And so that's, creators need to be more, like if they're going to be conniving and deceiving and working behind the doors, all these execs, the creators need to be thinking, get David Lynch about it.
So why is it, do you think, that the 1990s seem to be making such a comeback? We're looking at a lot of things. When I was growing up, it was the 1950s. So in 1975, you could not avoid the 1950s. I was not yet alive during the 1950s. I didn't know anything about them, except that all of a sudden, American Graffiti comes out, and movies like that start to come out, and all of a sudden there's this wave of nostalgia. And I get it. I get, if you grew up at a certain period, that you have a wave of nostalgia. Now that 50s nostalgia lasted for a very long time. Then you had 60s nostalgia, which still seems to not really want to go away. But lately, it just feels to me like everything in 1990s is making a comeback. And I wonder why. I think that there is something to be said about our need for distraction and our need to feel comfortable with things that we love when you can't turn on the news without hearing some terrible thing and your X feed is a dumpster fire and everything is terrible. You think, well, you know what? I'm going to watch Seinfeld for a couple of hours or Frasier, because I've seen them all 100 times, but they make me feel better. And I'm not going to be terribly challenged by anything that happens here. And they're not going to be talking about anything that is happening in real life now. So there's not going to be jokes, that refer to current events. Maybe current events of the day, but that was a long time ago. Not going to be referring to things that upset me now in the news. So I think that's what it is. But still, the 80s and the 90s seem to me to be these sticky decades that just don't seem to want to go.
Yeah, I think there is a few things happening here. Yeah, we see waves of like nostalgia and also just like retro design elements. I think that's part of it. I'm a set design person and like a props person. So a period piece immediately is kind of more exciting just visually to me as well. So I think that's why you see, recycles, especially after like 20, 30 years. But I do think that there is something particular about the 90s where we were operating like it was like a heyday for risk taking, creativity. Like we got to this point where you could have fun. There's like a lot of surrealism in these movies in the 90s. Like there's a lot of like I think of movies like Point Break or Speed, or like you suspend your disbelief.
Right.
And I think films and TV took like a realism turn after the millennium. And I think there is something about nostalgia, but particularly for the 90s. And also, us millennials, it might have something to do with the age of now the people who are in the biggest demographic are wanting what we've seen. But I have to say, like, just when I'm going to go through a list, because when I said 2026 to 2027 is the reboots year, it's actually more intense than I would ever think. And the more I kept looking, if you just Google, you'll get a list, but then you start Googling and you'll get 10 more. It's never ending. So let me give this to you. And I do think that there is something particularly creative about most of these things. We got Coogler's X-Files, Ryan Coogler.
So there's Ryan Coogler, director of Sinners and the Creed movies and things. This one I'm actually excited about. I'm excited about because, he was a fan. He was a fan growing up. And the reason that he's doing this, much like the reason that he sort of had the nerve to go to Sylvester Stallone and say, I have some new ideas for Rocky. And some new ideas for, I think we could do something there. Because he was a fan of those movies and he knew that there was another track to take with those. And I think that he'll find that with the X-Files as well. I do find it kind of interesting that he's coming off an enormous hit with Sinners, probably, the most awarded movie, certainly the most nominated movie that he's ever made. And he's going back from making original IP, intellectual property like Sinners, into making something what theoretically could be a little safer in the form of the X-Files.
I mean, it's pretty.
I think right now he can make whatever he wanted.
True. Right? Very true. And it's also pretty amazing that Ryan Coogler and Chloe Zhao were like classmates, collaborative partners. They thanked each other like at the Oscars. They were at the Oscars. They both had Oscar nominated films. And then they're both being like, let me go back to my favorite childhood TV show and redo that.
Yeah.
That speaks really, really deeply to my heart. And okay, X-Files is a perfect example because it's almost like you can't not mention the X-Files. There are certain concepts that are so kind of singular and good and kind of iconic that if you made a show about aliens in the government and it wasn't X-Files, that would just be like rude.
Right.
Disrespectful. It's like they had that concept. It's a genius concept. I mean, I've met people in real life who have been like, I have a grandfather who worked for the CIA and the stories I could tell you. You know what I mean? Like I have been Mulder looking for the truth. And so when you have a concept like Star Trek is kind of a similar thing. Exploration of space. Yeah, you can do that in 1,000 different ways. You know, like if you're just talking about aliens, you're going to be reminded of the X-Files because they did it so good. And so you might as well. So that like is genius. You might as well jump on that IP. You're giving homage, you're paying homage, and yeah, you're getting that like emotional connection. You're getting the platform push. The audiences are there. You're getting the algorithmic reinforcement. You're getting built-in marketing, just like visuals, right? Like even the Mulder and Scully relationship, people still post like old photo shoots that they did. And like there is a sexiness, chicness to this retro sensibility of it. And so, yeah. But again, I think it's a thing of the 90s.
Yeah.
Because then we have Baywatch.
Yeah.
Malcolm in the Middle, Scrubs, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, potentially. A Different World, The Burbs, which was a film, but now they're going to do
but not a very particularly successful film either. So you know, success is not necessarily even a benchmark now in consideration as to whether or not we can remake it or not.
It's pretty interesting, yeah, because I've talked about this too. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
Right.
They just recently remade this. To me, that is again peak 90s. Like that film was so 90s coded in terms of how unhinged it was, how risk-taking it was. It's an insane plot line. It's like after her sex offender husband gets caught in the act and kills himself, an embittered pregnant widow loses her child and embarks on a mission of revenge. Like, hello?
Yeah. Wow.
You're not getting stuff like that anymore. And so, and if you look at the reboot, the things they're saying are like actually much worse. They're more boring. The
reboot did not work for me. The remake of it fell flat, and you know, was an example for me anyway. As I was watching, I was thinking, why am I not just watching the original of this? Because the original was, as you say, kind of unhinged in all the best ways.
But then the 90s is great for this too. All these moralistic lessons at the end. Like it goes to wild places and then it pulls it back in and it reminds us kind of like a after school special vibe of like, listen, we did crazy shit here, but there's like heart and earnestness there. And that is what the 90s, I think Hand That Rocks the Cradle is a perfect example. I could write a paper on comparing these two films and what is missing from modern day films that the 90s was doing. This modern day, it's to me, if you just read that log line and you discuss The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, it's so unhinged. People might say, yeah, that's sexist, that's ableist, that's wild. Right. And, but in fact, but it's actually addressing those things as opposed to new movies in the modern takes of them often tend to be kind of not going deep enough, like being less risk averse to the conversations that are happening. But then in the end, they end up saying less and being more offensive in my mind, because the women in the new one, like they're just not fully fleshed out characters that are like make mistakes and do weird things and, you know, can have the wide range of emotions. And I do think that like the 90s, it was giving. It was giving in a way that we're not seeing anymore.
Yeah, I think in the case of The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, it was treated strictly as IP. Here's an idea, We don't, I don't care if you're a big fan of it or not. Here's an idea, and we can make some money from this. And it
Well, and to
strikes
your
me as
original
being,
point, very random
yeah,
of a film
it,
to choose.
oh, absolutely. But I would say that it wasn't something that was made because it was beloved by the filmmakers and the people that were making it. Unlike how I feel about the X Files and Ryan
Yes.
Coogler going after that, the Buffy and Sarah Michelle Gellar, So there's all of that. So then you have to wonder, why is it? Is it just corporate stagnation? Is it that creative stagnation that we look at these big companies and they say, well, you know what? We own all this stuff already. We don't actually have to pay people to come up with ideas anymore. We own all this stuff already. So let's, filter it through. We'll get it, written, we'll hire a couple of writers, we'll get it written, and we can bang this stuff out. And it stops from, it eliminates the need, in some cases, for expensive development and that sort of thing. Let's take something that's worked once and we'll do it again, and hopefully it will work again.
Yeah,
So
it's almost
I
like they're
kind of
like,
get that.
it's a waste if we don't do it, right? Like
Right,
Game of
because they
Thrones
own
feels
everything.
this way.
If you look at the big studios, when you've been around for 100 years, like the major studios have been, you own a lot of stuff. You own a lot of characters. You own a lot of IP. You own a lot of things that I can see if you were a studio head, an MBA sitting in the big office going, why are we not taking advantage of all this stuff that we already own? If it was any other business, you would be taking these assets that you already own and exploiting them. But the creative world doesn't exactly work that way. I mean, it does to a certain extent, and I'm not suggesting in any way that there haven't always been remakes. I mean, I think, and I didn't look this up before we started shooting today, but I think the Maltese Falcon that we know with Humphrey Bogart, I think that was the third time they had made it.
Right.
And
Or
so,
like, what was that lady? A Star is Born.
yeah,
How many A Star is Borns
right.
are there?
So it is not like they've never done this before. But it used to be, when the Maltese Falcon came out, that, a movie would come out, and it would play in theaters for as long as it played in theaters. In the 30s, you could have a movie play in a theater for a year, but then it disappeared. It was gone. You probably weren't going to see it again. And so a remake sort of kind of made a little bit more sense. Hey, if they like that one, then they'll like this version of it. But now, where everything exists, we can find anything.
Right.
If you want to remake Buffy, well, there's no excuse for that guy, the executive, to say, well, I've never seen it. Well, because it's easy to see. Everything is easy to see. So I would have imagined that might have eroded the idea that these remakes are valuable simply because the originals are so easy to find.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And I do think that's what's happening sometimes as to why these are failing. But I gotta say, the business clocks, because on a personal level, I know I'm guilty of it. Like, I get excited. Yeah, original ideas just have to prove themselves. Reboots just have to kind of like remind you, like, hey.
Yep.
And anything that they did good kind of rises to the top in the memory, right? And then anything that kind of was less successful are things that I just easily forget about. So I myself get really excited by the idea of reboots and revitalizing IP. I'm a sucker for it. And I get the business behind that. Or like we were saying, there's certain shows that even if you knew it was going to be not like the most creative, artistic thing, it's almost like we have to try it, and maybe even the fans deserve it. Like, I think of Friends, okay? And even the actors, like, there's a few actors on there who are like, the Courtney Cox and the Jennifer Anistons, or, maybe I'm ready to leave. Whereas, yeah, Joey, he's like, give me my own show, and they did. And I don't think anybody ever thought that was going to be a success. But as a business decision, it does make sense.
Yeah, I suppose so. I wonder too if the 90s monoculture that we had, right? So in the 90s, I remember going to see like the final episode of Cheers, and you go see
At
the
a
final
bar?
episode. Yeah, you go to a bar to watch it, and the bar would be jam packed because everyone wanted to see the final episode of Cheers. And I'm sure that I remember working in a bar behind a bar when Johnny Carson did his last show. And, we aired Johnny every night leading up to the final last show after 30 years. The king of late night television is going to, hang up the spurs, and the bar would be packed and people would be quiet when it was on because they wanted to see all this because, more or less, we all knew about the same stuff. If you were following movies, if you were following television, you really knew what was going on. And in the 90s, we started to get more and more channels. It's not like it is today, but still, the big network television was kind of what people were paying attention to. And so I see that as being, part of the reason that so much more of this is getting remade now, because we all sort of have it. Now that monoculture is gone. It has disappeared. And we don't all watch the same stuff and listen to the same stuff. Every now and again, Taylor Swift's Era Tour is a pretty good example of something that created a monoculture around itself. Everyone, even if you're not a Taylor Swift fan, it was happening. They've named streets after her here in Toronto and that kind of thing as she played here. And there is that kind of thing that happens. But I wonder if the pop culture of today, 30 years from now, is going to have enough, people are going to have enough fondness for it to go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I really have to see Beef remade. Beef's a great show.
Yeah.
But, and if it was a network television show 30 years ago, it still would have been really popular. And for sure, they'd be remaking it now.
Right.
Will they remake Beef? and any the Beef was just the first show that popped into my head, but will they remake that show in 30 years from now? I don't think so, because that monoculture has dissolved.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it'll have a slightly different name, and they'll use the concept because the concept overall works, because at our hearts we're all miserable people that would get into some kind of altercation like that, maybe. That will still be understandable and relatable, I guess.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a great point, because even if we are doing our own things and we're having a cultural impact that is redefining itself or having new conversations through old IP, there is a limit there, and there is like a concern for a risk to original storytelling, where even if Beef is a wide, or like I was saying about the X-Files, it's wide enough to continue to go on forever. But if we're not also creating new enough, truly brand new, out of nowhere, singular ideas now, what will we be adapting 30 years from now? There will be a point where the snake eats its own tail. So
Right.
I do think it is important to still have those balance. And the risk, I guess, is when that mechanism starts to work so good that now the only greenlit projects, you have to have some sort of original IP or fallback. So, but if we're talking about the cultural impact, I do think that it's less a threat than it might come off at the beginning, because I think even things that we're like, oh, don't ruin it. I mean, the things are still there as their own questions. And yeah, it's like we can have updated conversations.
Yeah. Well, people say, oh, they're ruining my childhood with the new, whatever it is, right? The comic book that I love, that's now a movie that they present the characters a little differently than I had in my imagination. And I always think when people say that to me, and it does happen, I always think of Raymond Chandler, who was the great detective and crime writer. And a lot of his books were made into movies that didn't really have a whole lot to do with the books that he had actually written.
Right.
His books were very successful. And someone would say to him, how do you feel about Hollywood ruining your books? He goes, my books aren't ruined. They're right up there on the shelf. They're fine. Those books are okay. The movies are a different thing, and they can be. Two things can exist that are kind of the same, but be a little bit different, and it's different medium, and et cetera, et cetera. So all
I
that stuff.
love that. And it opens up to new audiences because do you know how I know who Raymond Chandler is? Because of Captain Picard on the
Oh, because he read
Starship
him, right?
Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yes, because he was a fan of Raymond Chandler and he would actually plug in Raymond Chandler novels into the hologram so that he could be the lead character. And so
It's like an Audible that you can actually be a part of.
that's right. Hey, listen, the holodeck causes a lot of troubles. A lot of wild things happen because of the holodeck, but one thing, so I think that that's beautiful, and I think that that is like the most balanced take we could take from this is like robots can be safe and profitable, but they can also be like risky and new and like finding a new audience for
They
a
can.
legacy.
And so the question then there is, are we revisiting stories? Are we just ripping off the past, or are we, well, that's not exactly it. Are we revisiting them? Are we revisiting them? Are we bringing something new to them, or are we just reselling them?
Yeah.
And, I think, and to bring it back to the X-Files, I think Ryan Coogler will revisit it, and he'll figure out a way to make it interesting and make it of its moment and, all that kind of thing, but still be respectful. I have a feeling, maybe, I don't know, I didn't see it, but the Buffy pilot probably kind of did the same thing as well. It just wasn't to that executive's taste. But I think my problem isn't revisiting so much as it is just reselling and reselling the same thing. I think The Hand That Rocks the Cradle is an example of something that resold the title, but not the spirit of the original.
That's exactly it. And we need the spirit. So keep the spirit, keep the sequels coming, keep the original content coming. One thing that I'm very excited about, and I'd like to get your opinion on before we wrap up here, is The Fly remake. Have you heard of this?
I have
From
heard of this.
Nikyatu Jusu. She's saying that they're stressing that it's going to be in the universe of Cronenberg's film rather than a straightforward remake. So this sounds exactly like what the fine line we're talking about, because this is, again, even Cronenberg's was a remake, right?
Yeah.
And we've
so,
even seen it like on The Simpsons and like in pop culture
Yep.
so many times. So I think this could be one to watch out for this year. And again, it could be a really good case study on what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I am a huge Cronenberg fan. I interviewed him recently, and I just read somewhere. This is what I was just about to say. I'm a huge Cronin head because I had read that that's what his fans are called, and I said to him, "Well, do you know that your fans are called Cronin heads?" And he goes, "No, no," and I don't like it. It sounds like something that should be popped, like a pimple.
That's very him answer.
He's not a fan. He's not a fan of Cronin heads, but I am a Cronin head. I am a Cronenberg fan. And so my initial reaction to the idea that they were remaking The Fly is, oh no, why are you remaking The Fly? I love that movie. But here's the thing, like Raymond Chandler, I've got a copy of The Fly sitting on my shelf here somewhere. So that movie's not going anywhere.
That's right.
It could sit next to The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, the original version. And, any other of these remakes that I haven't liked, I can have the originals on my shelf and still feel pretty good about that.
Exactly. And maybe someone will pick up Cronenberg's The Fly because they hear about this new reboot. And
Right, yeah.
that is never bad either. So if these reboots are also there to like show some love to the past, I'm here for that as well. At the end of the day, I'm a nostalgia girly, so I will be watching them all.
Yeah. I mean, I find myself watching all this stuff. My level of enjoyment, though, varies. And my level of enjoyment really does seem to revolve around the idea of whether it's been revisited or resold. And so if it's been revisited, sure. If it's been resold and it's just, we're remaking this thing, we're remaking this thing because we've got a bunch of them sitting around and we're going to do whatever we want to do with it, then I get less interested. And,
Fair. Fair. Now, having said that, I'm about to resell our listeners on the pod. If you have not subscribed, followed, liked, please do so.
Do it now. It doesn't take very long. And I'll tell you, it's better than The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And it takes less time. The pod takes less time to watch than the remake.
And I'm already suffering from the Buffy cancellation, so don't give me any more reasons to be emo this week. And find us here next week. Richard, thank you so much.
Thanks to you. We'll talk to you soon.